Good afternoon, and welcome to today's program on financial well-being as part of the VBA Young Lawyers Division Lawyer Wellness Challenge. I'm Ann Petros, Chair of the YLD. Today's program is titled Master Your Money, Strategies to Manage Your Personal Finances, and is presented by Ro Thomas. Ro Thomas is an attorney and financial coach who believes that true wealth is having control of your time. She helps lawyers master their personal finances to create freedom and choice in their lives. She also hosts the Wealthy-esque podcast, where she shares strategies each week for lawyers to improve their money mindset and manage their money to achieve true wealth. No MCLE credits are offered for this program. We have reserved time at the end of today's presentation for questions, so please submit any questions for Ro in the chat box, and she will get to those questions at the end of her presentation. So without further ado, Ro, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Anne, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be with you all. As Anne said, we are going to be talking about strategies to manage your personal finances today. I am going to share my screen, and once I do, I'm actually going to go off camera. It's a little trick that I learned that if all of us are off camera, once we share the screen, then we don't have to worry about people having to move the little boxes around and all of that kind of stuff. So let me do that now, and we can get right to it. So welcome. Today, we are talking about managing your finances better. As we said, money is the #1 stressor for Americans, according to a number of studies. And then, of course, lawyers tend to have a lot of stress just in our practices and all of that kind of stuff. So if we can do some things to eliminate a little bit of that stress, then I think we're going to be in good hands, right? Or on the right track. So here is how you know this program is for you. Number one, if you are feeling shame, anxiety, stress, overwhelm, confusion, hopelessness, like these negative emotions that don't feel great about your finances, you're in the right place. If you avoid your finances, if you are, not looking at your bank account statements, or you feel anxious and you don't want to open your credit card statements, you spend now and worry about, the impact later, in the right place. If you want to improve your finances, but you think it requires depriving yourself, you think that you have to cut out all the fun things to manage your money better, you're in the right place. That is a common misconception. And if you think money is hard, you think it's too complicated, you think it's too tedious, like if any of these things are true for you, then you are in the right place. And over the course of the next hour or so, I want you to think about what it would be like to feel complete peace about your finances, what it would feel like to not stress about money, to know what you're going to have to do to improve your finances. I am going to teach you what you need to do just that. And my goal is that you see how simple managing your money can be. It does not have to be stressful and overwhelming and all of those things. So let me tell you a little bit more about me. Again, my name is Ro Thomas. I am a lawyer turned financial coach. I practiced trademark law for 7 years before transitioning to financial coaching full-time back in 2021. So I know firsthand the stress from being a lawyer and all of that kind of stuff. And I also know stress from personal finances and money issues. So if you are not familiar with my story, back in 2016, my husband and I had our first child, and I wanted to take advantage of a part-time policy that my firm was offering, where I could do a percentage of the billable hour for that same percentage of my salary. So, maybe 70% of the billable hour requirement for 70% of my salary. But we could not afford to take that pay cut. When we looked at our finances, we had $678,000 of debt, almost $500,000 of which was student loans. We had a negative $342,000 net worth. And up to that point, we thought we were doing the things that we were supposed to do, right? Like we paid our bills on time, we paid our credit cards in full each month, we were contributing to our retirement accounts, but we were not being intentional with our money. So we weren't making true progress. Like we were staying in the same place month after month, We didn't know that, right? We didn't plan our spending. We didn't know how much debt we had. We didn't understand how the different parts of our finances played with each other. So, for example, one of the things that we realized once we really got into this was that the money that we were saving for retirement was basically being canceled out by all the interest that was accruing on all that debt, right? Like we didn't know that. So most of our extra money that we could have been using to improve our finances, like paying off debt, saving, that kind of stuff, was going to restaurants around the city, going to Amazon, going shopping, like all of that kind of stuff. And I hated being in this position where I felt like my choices were constrained by my finances. Like I hated not being able to make the decisions that I wanted to make for my family because of money. And so I became obsessed with learning about money. I read books, I listened to podcasts, I was, in forums, all of that. And we started implementing the things that I was learning. And ultimately, we identified what worked for us, what didn't, and we developed a sustainable system to manage our money better. So now we have paid off all of our student loans, and it was a little under 6 years. We finished back at the end of 2021, and we now have a positive net worth. Our only remaining debt is our mortgage, which is a little under 200,000. We have done all of this work on our finances, and I was able to drop down to 50% during the pandemic because we had two young kids at the time. I was trying to, balance a lot of things. So I ultimately did get a chance to take advantage of that policy. And then ultimately, because of where we were with our finances, I was able to leave the law altogether to go full-time in my business, helping other lawyers with their finances. I have helped multiple lawyers over the years do similar things. One of my clients freed up $4,000 a month in cash flow that she started putting toward her student loans. Another one was consistently was consistently spending more on his credit card each month than the amount of his paycheck. So we got his spending in check and he was able to direct that surplus towards savings. Many of my clients have paid off thousands and tens of thousands of dollars of debt. One went from having no savings at all to having a $30,000 emergency fund. So I say all of that to say, like, I know a little bit about personal finance, both from personal experience and from helping other people with their finances. And so I'm sharing with you today the things that I have learned about being better with money so that you don't have to stress about your money so much. So we're going to talk about the main areas that I see lawyers struggling with their money and how to fix them. And then, as Ann said, we will have time for questions at the end. All right, the first area we're going to talk about is managing your cash flow and just the general lack of awareness that many of us have around our spending. So you might not know where your money is going each month, like I didn't back in 2016. Maybe you overdraft your account sometimes, right? It dips into the negative. Maybe your credit card bill is more than your paycheck, like the client that I just told you about, or you feel like you should have more money in your account based on how much you make. When you don't have a handle on your cash flow and you don't know what's happening with your money each month, it has a trickle-down effect on all the other areas of your finances. So let's get into managing your cash flow better. I talk to a lot of lawyers who are spending a lot of money. They can, cover their bills. They can buy things that they want, all of that kind of stuff, but they're not paying attention to their money. And it's really easy to get into this. This is exactly the trap that I fell into, right? So you're not paying attention to money. They're not intentionally managing the money that they bring in. And so then they're not achieving their money goals. They're not making progress with their debt. They don't have much in savings. They don't have money to show for the income that they're making. And it's really easy for your expenses to grow to fill your income when you're not being intentional about how you're spending. This is one of my favorite graphics. It shows how we typically handle increases in income. So like when we're first starting out, like, we don't really have much in savings, like our income, is at a certain level, our needs are like, right there around that same level. And as we increase our income over the years, we also increase those things that we think we need, right? Like our spending continues to grow to kind of match the income. And so we don't have the opportunity to save as much as we could because we are spending more and more. This concept is called lifestyle creep. I think we all do it on some level. Like, I don't live the same way that I lived when I was in law school, right? And I'm not suggesting that anyone should still live that way. But if we don't keep this in check, that's how we end up making more money year over year, but we feel like we still need more. We feel like it's still not enough and we don't make the progress that we want to make financially. Wealth is built in the gap between your income and expenses. So that means like having a level of income and not spending it all, having a gap between how much you're spending out, right? When you're not paying attention to your cash flow, it's easy for that gap to be tiny or non-existent. Anywhere from 60 to 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck based on various surveys. And that includes 25% of households making $150,000 or more, 60% of millennials making $100,000 or more, and 36% of people making $250,000 or more. For some people, their expenses are outpacing their income, so that's how we end up with credit card debt. And when we are living paycheck to paycheck, it is very hard to make the kind of progress that you want to make, right? And it might not look the way that you typically think, because as a lawyer, you're probably not getting to the point where you don't know if you're going to be able to eat, or you don't know if you're going to be able to pay, your rent or your mortgage. For lawyers, it's usually like, I'm using money this month to cover last month's bills, or I have high credit card balances that I can't pay off, or I don't have money available to save. It is impossible to build wealth when you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you're much more likely to feel stressed if that's what's happening with your money. Another area I see lawyers struggling with is debt. So we tend to have a lot of student loan debt, but we also might have credit card debt or car loans or personal loans or other debt too. So let's talk about student loans first. Student loan debt is out of control. Like, the cost of higher education has risen at about double the rate of inflation over the last 50 years. According to a study by the ABA, 95% of law students take out student loans, 75% graduate with more than $100,000 of student loan debt. And often lawyers are reporting delaying milestones like getting married or having kids or buying houses or taking the job that they really wanted to take because of their student loans. And then beyond our student loan debt, the total credit card balance for Americans is $841 billion, with an average balance of over $6,500 per person. And I don't have like scientific or like specific statistical figures for lawyers, but in my experience, I typically see more like $10,000 to $20,000 per person with lawyers that I work with. The average personal loan balance for Americans is also in that $6,500 range. The average car payment is $500 to $650 a month. And then, so when we add that on top of the $100,000 or maybe $200,000 student loan debt, we've got a lot of debt. Often when we are faced with this kind of debt, we will ignore it, we avoid it, we don't know what's going on, we don't know the details, we don't know how things like interest rates impact it. So, kind of like what I was talking about with my own student loans and our retirement accounts, and how the interest that was accruing on that much debt was basically canceling out the money that we were putting into retirement. I also remember, I don't know exactly what my balance was when I graduated, but it was somewhere around, say $110,000. Like, I know it wasn't much beyond that. So, say it was $110,000. My payment was almost $1,000 a month. And when we started on this whole journey, I had been out of school for 2 years. So if we take into account that we had a 6-month grace period, right? Like that 6-month period right after you graduate where you don't have to make payments, I had made payments for about 18 months. So I made $18,000 of payments. You could not tell me that my student loans weren't going to be in the 90s. Like when we decided to get all of our debt in order and get the details, I just knew I was going to be in the 90s. It was $104,000. I paid almost $20,000 and my balance decreased by 6,000. And I didn't appreciate the effect that the interest rate was having on my loan balances. I didn't know that people paid off debts early, right? Like I thought that you paid the amount that the bank tells you to pay and you're good. Another thing is we will sometimes move debt around to feel better, but that can make it worse. And the biggest example that I see here is if you have credit card debt and you take out a personal loan to pay off the credit card, but then you run the credit card back up again. So now you have the personal loan debt and the credit card debt on top of it, right? All of this, I think, can be summed up as just not having a plan for our debt. Like we don't know what to do with it. So we just don't worry about it. We just, I'm just going to pay the amount that they tell me to pay, and I'm not going to worry about it. Saving and investing is another area that we often know we should get around to, but we don't make a plan for. So many lawyers don't think about saving or investing. It just keeps getting put off. I'll get to that later, sometime in the future when X, Y, or Z happens. But of course, we know like later doesn't really make it any easier, especially as we go through life. We have other, expenses that come up, other responsibilities, things like that. So we want to make sure that we are thinking about our saving and investing along the way. Many lawyers don't have much saved, or they don't have as much as they would like saved. And many of my clients almost think it's like an impossible task when they first come to work with me because they already have so much going on financially. So it seems like there's not enough available to save. And the statistics on this also kind of show the same thing. 69% of Americans have less than $1,000 in their savings account, and almost half of them, 45%, have $0. There is also a lot of information in the financial industry that makes investing seem complicated. So it seems easier to just avoid it, just, get to it later, put it off. And, if you're anything like me, I don't particularly like doing things that I don't know how to do, right? So it makes sense that we put things off or that we avoid them. And again, I don't have lawyer specific numbers here, but a little less than half of Americans have no money invested in the stock market at all, and 25% have nothing saved for retirement. And this kind of bears out with what I see in my practice, where many of the lawyers that come to me don't have anything invested. They often aren't actively investing in their retirement accounts. So let's talk about the main issue of what's going on here. All of the things that we just talked about are the result of one thing, and that is spending as much as or more than you earn. So your cash flow issues, going into debt or not getting out of debt, not saving, all of that comes from overspending. Lawyers often think that, if I just made a little bit more money, then everything would be okay. But it's not that we need more money. Like for most lawyers, that's not the problem. Like, sure, there are times where people actually don't make enough money to cover their bills, but for the majority of lawyers, that's not the case. So for those who don't fall in that boat, the key is to learn how to manage the money that you already have and figure out why you're spending more than you make. And that stems from your money mindset. Our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are all connected, and they lead to everything that's happening with our money and all the other areas of our lives. So if you are familiar with cognitive behavioral theory in psychology, it teaches that there are things that exist or happen out in the world, right? So in this case, money. And then we bring our thoughts, our opinions to those things, and that creates our experience of those things. So our thoughts lead to these particular emotions. They lead us to do or not do certain things. And the things that we do and don't do lead to certain outcomes in our lives. And then our brain will look at those outcomes as evidence to prove the original thought, and it will dismiss any evidence to the contrary or that's not relevant. So a good example of like the brain's tendency to kind of filter for relevant information is when you get a new car and all of a sudden on the road, it seems like everybody has your car. Like it's not actually that more people have the car, but your brain notices that car more because it's relevant information for you now. So your brain is like showing it to you more, right? So that's what happens too with our thoughts about money and with the things that are happening in our lives. Like we are looking, or our brains, subconsciously are looking for evidence that prove the things that we believe or the things that we're thinking about our money. So the connection between your thoughts, your behaviors, your actions is key to change your finances, right? Like stopping overspending, starting the other habits that you want to do. We got to get that connection right. We got to get your money mindset together. All right, so let's talk about thoughts about yourself. We tend to be very hard on ourselves. We think we have to do everything exactly perfectly right or we failed. I remember a friend of mine posted on LinkedIn recently about how we'll get a like meets expectations in like a review for work. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is so terrible. But it's like literally you met the expectations, but because we didn't get the exceeds expectations, then we might as well have failed, right? It's like we tend to be really hard on ourselves. A lot of times we have these thoughts like, I'm not good with money. I don't know how to do this. I'm never going to figure this out. I should already know how to do this by now, right? All these really bad feeling thoughts, and we'll beat ourselves up and then wonder why we haven't been able to make the progress that we want to make. But you're never going to get to positive results from negative thinking like that, or at least not long-term sustained positive results. Like you might be able to kind of beat yourself up to get the result in the short term, but you're not going to be able to sustain it. I often liken this to yo-yo dieting, where, it's like, I'm going to deprive myself, I'm going to cut everything out. I can only eat kale and drink water, right? Like you might be able to get to the result, but like at some point you're going to get tired of just eating kale and drinking water. It's the same kind of thing here, where you don't want to only be using these like negative tactics to get yourself to do something. It might work for a little while, but it's not going to work long term. We also have thoughts about money. So we tend to think money is complicated. There's the whole joke about, lawyers go into law because they're not good with math, right? We think that being good with money means you have to be deprived. We think that budgets are time consuming or tedious, so we don't want to take the time to make one, or if we do, we don't want to take the time to stick to it. And this one in particular is one that I always talk to my people about, because your budget is literally just a plan for how you're going to use your money, right? It's not a bad thing necessarily. So if you don't like the word budget, you can just call it your plan. Like sometimes we'll just call it a spending plan. It's the same thing. It's you planning how you're going to use your money. We think that whatever we try isn't going to work. Like there's no point in trying. It's not going to work anyway, because maybe we've tried things in the past that didn't work out. But if we believe these kinds of things about money or about the skills that we need to manage our money in the way that we want to, we are not going to be very likely to take the steps to manage our money better, right? Even if you really want to, you're not going to do it. Or maybe you start, but you don't stick with it, just like we talked about with the yo-yo dieting example, right? I say all the time, we know what to do. Like there is so much information out there about personal finance and about how to, manage your money better and all of that. But the reason that we don't do it is always because of our mindset. I can give you all the strategy in the world, and I am going to give you the process that I teach my clients and all of that. But if you don't believe that you can improve your finances, or you don't believe that the strategies will work for you, then you're not going to actually do it. All right, so let's look at this relationship a little bit deeper, the thought, emotion, behavior relationship. I am using the thought, I'm not good with money, because that one comes up for so many people. And there is a great tool out of the Life Coach School called the self-coaching model. And it's a really effective way at looking at this loop. So their tool uses the letter CTFAR to stand for the different pieces of the loop. C stands for circumstance. So remember, we talked about there are things that just exist in the world, like money, right? And then we bring our thoughts to them. So those things are circumstances. T stands for thought, whatever the thought or opinion is that you have about the circumstance. The F is the feeling or your emotion that you feel when you think that thought. The A is your actions, your behaviors, what you're doing, what you're not doing. And then R is the result, or another word for outcome. So when we look at this example, our circumstance is money. And if I think I'm not good with money, I might feel defeated. If I'm feeling defeated, I might avoid looking at my bank account. Maybe I don't plan my spending. I run up my credit cards because I'm not paying attention to how much I've spent. I don't look at my debt balances. I overspend. And then the result is that I'm not good with money. And I put good in quotation marks because that's still an opinion, right? But maybe the actual things that happened are that I don't have money left to save, or my account is negative, or I don't have money to pay off my debt, or I go into more debt, right? So I look at that and I think, see, I'm just not good with money. And then that starts this loop all over again. So you can see how important it is to address your money mindset when you are improving your finances. Because as I said before, I can give you all the strategy in the world, but if you don't address that mindset, then it's not going to do you any good because you're not actually going to implement. All right, so let's get into the strategy now. I teach a very simple process for improving your finances. This is it. You first spend less than you make. Then you're going to use the difference to achieve whatever your goals are. And then along the way, you're going to manage your mindset and let go of those negative thoughts that we just talked about. The first piece in this is to create your spending plan or your budget. So not having a plan really hinders your ability to achieve your goals and build wealth because, as we talked about, it is really easy for your expenses to keep creeping up to the point that they equal or exceed your income if you're not being intentional. If you don't know what's coming in, if you don't know what's going out, you are, not being intentional with how you direct your money, then it's hard to make the progress that you could be making with your money because you don't know what money you have available to make that progress. So you want to decide what you're doing with your money ahead of time. And when you are creating your plan, make sure you account for your needs, wants, and goals. I don't believe in cutting everything but the essentials and stop drinking your lattes and, all that kind of stuff. Stop shopping, whatever else. Like, you don't have to stop all of that stuff. You just have to plan for it. So you consider, what you value, what's important to you. If fancy restaurants or, designer shoes or whatever it is important to you, put that in your plan. You just have to balance it. So the money you spend on those things is money that you don't have available for something else. So if those things are important to you, how do you account for them in your plan? Like, those are the kinds of things that you want to be thinking about, like the types of questions that you want to be asking yourself so that you can make sure that you are covering the things that you need, right? Like your bills, like your minimum payments, all that stuff, the things that you want, but then you also have room for these goals like paying off debt and saving and investing and all that. I always take a minute in these presentations to talk to anyone who, like me, is the first in the family to be a lawyer, or anyone else who just feels like, because I'm a lawyer, I have to do this. I have to help this person, whatever it is. Like, you might feel that pressure to help family members or to help others who aren't in a similar position. That might be internal pressure. It could be external pressure. Like, maybe someone is specifically telling you, you should be helping me with this because you're the lawyer, right? What I tell my people in this position and what I did is, you have to take care of your own finances before you can help someone else. You have to put yourself on stronger financial footing before you can help other people. And that doesn't mean that you have to be completely out of debt and have hundreds of thousands of dollars and, whatever else like in the bank. But you need to, at minimum, know what's going on with your finances, and you need to have a plan for your spending and have a plan to reach your own goals. You can't be the unlimited source of money for other people just because you're the lawyer in the family, because while you're doing all of that, trying to take care of everyone else, you're putting yourself in a worse position, right? Like, you're staying stuck in the same place financially, or even end up going backwards, and you're not able to clean up your own finances. You're not able to get to where you want to be. And you ultimately aren't able to help your family or help whoever else in the way that you could once you had your finances under control, right? Like when you get to that point where you achieve your goals, where you pay off your debt, where you build that savings, where you get to that net worth, you'll be in a better position to help your family. So using my own example, we are much better able to help our family now, having no debt but our mortgage and a positive net worth, versus when we were drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and we had a negative net worth. At one point, our minimum payments on student loans was $3,500, $3,500 a month. So now that we have paid off the student loans, that's $3,500 that's freed up that could go toward helping others when they need it, right? And to be clear, we did still help over the years. So, we continued to tithe, we continued to give to charity, we helped with our families. Like if people needed things, we were able to help, but we did it on a more constrained basis to make sure that we were still able to hit our goals. And the way you do that is accounting for it in your spending plan. The main thing is you want to be mindful of how much is going out for family or others and make sure that you're not putting yourself at risk financially trying to help them, right? You still want to be able to make progress on your own goals. And a lot of times that means enforcing boundaries with people or, technically having more money that could go toward helping with something, but like you need that money for your own goals. It's like you just kind of have to sit with the discomfort of enforcing the boundaries. But again, you are in a much better position when you have your own finances under control and you can't truly help others if you're struggling. All right. So moving into paying off debt, part of this process is determining your financial goals. So for most of my clients, I think for most lawyers, that typically involves paying off some sort of debt. So if being debt-free is one of your goals, you likely have the ability to manage your debt now. Like more lawyers have the ability to work on that than they realize. I know a lot of times we think that if we just made more, that we would be able to pay off the debt, we'd be debt-free, but you can start making progress on that even if you never made another dime by managing your money a little bit differently. The key here is to make a plan for your debt. And that's not necessarily to say that you have to pay it all off immediately, but you can determine how you want to tackle your debt. So some people will distinguish between like high interest debt, like credit cards, and lower interest debt, and they'll pay off the high interest debt quickly, and then they will direct their money to other goals and just pay off the lower interest debt over time. Others choose to knock out everything regardless of the interest rate. That's what we did, everything but our mortgage. Ultimately, it's personal preference. Just keep in mind that with debt, the power of compound interest works against you, especially if you have high interest debt. So maintaining those balances costs you more money over time. If you are making a plan, the two most popular methods for paying off debt are the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. With the snowball, you pay your debts from smallest to largest balance without regard to interest rate. With the avalanche, you pay your debts from largest to smallest interest rate without regard to the balance. You can also look at whether there are any particular debts that are more bothersome to you in considering the order that you want to pay them. So for example, I remember for some of my clients, their parents co-signed on certain loans for them. And so for some of them that felt like this is pressing, I want to go ahead and get this off so that it's not hanging over my parents' head, right? If there's something like that and you just want to get rid of that and it doesn't neatly fit into one of these strategies, that's fine. You get to decide what you want to do. And then also in making your plan, you can determine if you want to take advantage of any refinancing options or if there is a particular student loan repayment plan option that would work well for you. If one of your goals is saving, you want to look first at building an emergency fund if you don't have one. The amount of your emergency fund depends on your personal situation, your risk tolerance, like all of that. Some people will do as little as a month of expenses. Some people will do as much as a year. It's really up to you. Standard advice is to have 3 to 6 months of expenses. And the main idea is just to have a cushion if things go sideways and you don't have income coming in or something like that. You also want this to be in a boring place. Like I don't put emergency funds in investment accounts, like in the stock market, to try to get a better return. Your emergency fund is not an investment, right? Your emergency fund is a safety net. And when you put the money in the stock market, it is subject to the volatility of the stock market. Like, yes, you could get a higher return, but you could also lose money, right? So you don't want to have to worry about the balance dropping when you need it most, and investments can fluctuate. So, there's risk involved. That's why there's that opportunity for greater return. And, ultimately you do want to be investing, but your emergency fund is not an investment. So like, you don't want to have an emergency come up and then you go to the emergency fund and there's half the balance in there. As I said, though, you do want to be investing in the long run, and you don't want to only put your money in a savings account. Now, savings accounts are great for emergency funds, for shorter term savings goals, like saving for a vacation or saving for a house or a car, things like that. But you want to invest your money because your money can work for you and earn more money in interest. So this is where compound interest is working for you. I don't give specific investment advice, but I do give just some general education in this area. And the easiest place to get started with investing is the stock market. This is what most of us are familiar with because your 401k, your retirement account, all of that, typically you are investing in the stock market through those accounts. So we are generally familiar with those types of investments. But there are other investments, like you can invest in real estate or crypto or hard money lending, or things like that. With investing, you want to make sure that you understand what you're investing in. You don't want to go off of what somebody told you that you should invest in, or any of that. Make sure that you understand it, because it's your money. And if you don't understand what you're investing in, it's a lot easier for you to lose money. A fun concept that I talk about with my clients around investing is the concept of financial independence. So we all want to achieve financial independence at some point. This is financial independence is the point where you no longer need to earn money to cover your living expenses. So most of us want to hit this point by traditional retirement age, because that, when you're ready to retire, you want to have money available that cover your living expenses when you no longer want to work. There are some people, though, who are reaching financial independence sooner than traditional retirement age, sometimes as early as their 30s and 40s. Investing in the stock market is the most common route to financial independence, but you can also reach financial independence through other investment methods, like, getting rental income, or, things like that, where that rental income can cover your living expenses instead of you going and working for that money. If we are talking about investing in the stock market to reach financial independence, the typical rule of thumb is that you have reached financial independence once you have 25 times your annual living expenses in your investments. That comes from a study that looked at retirement portfolios to find out what was a safe amount that people could withdraw each year without running out of money. And that safe withdrawal rate was 4%. And so to determine how much you need to have invested so that your annual expenses are 4%, you multiply your annual expenses by 25. So that's where that rule of thumb comes from. Your savings rate is the most important figure in determining when you can achieve financial independence. So this is how much money you're saving in relation to your total income. And as I mentioned, the rule of thumb is tied to your expenses. So the lower your expenses, the more you're able to save each year. And I think of the term save loosely here, because I also include money that goes to extra debt payments for a few reasons. First, it's not money that you are spending. It's going toward improving your finances, right? It's helping to decrease your expenses, because as you pay off that debt, then you will have to pay out less in minimum payments. And then that money can be directed to building your investments once you're finished. So your savings rate will dictate how quickly you can reach financial independence. The higher your savings rate, the more quickly you get there, both because you're saving more and because the total amount you need is going to be lower. And then, of course, your lifestyle comes into play here too, because the more your lifestyle costs, the more you need to save to get to this point, and the less money that you have available to save each month. All of this goes back to overspending being the main issue that most people have. Because if you can get your spending under control, you can direct your money intentionally, you can achieve your goals like paying off debt, like financial independence, saving, all of that if you want to. I can't talk about investing without talking about financial advisors. As I mentioned, I don't give investment advice, but I do just want to share some information for you to consider if you're at the stage where, maybe you want to invest, but you don't want to do it yourself. So if you decide you want to work with a financial advisor, which I think financial advisors are great resources, but one of the biggest things that I encourage you to consider is how they are compensated. Some advisors make commissions off of selling investments, which means that they inherently have a conflict of interest because they could make more if they put you into an investment that offers a higher commission, even if it's not necessarily the best fit for you. If you do hire a financial advisor, look for a fee-only advisor, which means they charge you a set fee. Their compensation is not tied to you buying any particular product or getting commissions or anything like that. Watch out for fee-based advisors, because often they still offer some commission-based products versus fee-only advisors who just charge you that flat fee with no commission-based products. And then you also want to look for an advisor who acts as a fiduciary, meaning that they have to act in your best interest. And there are a few ways to find out if your advisor is a fiduciary. You can just ask. You can look for, there's a designation called the Certified Financial Fiduciary in the advisor space, CFF. It's not a requirement though. So like there are advisors who are fiduciaries, but don't necessarily hold that designation. And then there are some advisors who work for a company where they only sell that company's products. Typically, those advisors aren't fiduciaries because they are working for this company. So they have to kind of act in the interest of the company, right? Like they'll have quotas and profitability metrics and things like that. So they tend not to be fiduciaries. None of this, though, is to say that the financial advisors who work on commission will definitely put you into high commission products, or the ones who, aren't fiduciaries are going to take advantage of you or anything like that. Like I am sure there are great advisors in all different fee structures and all different settings and all of that. They are a great asset to you on your financial journey if you want to work with one. I just want you to know what to consider, or like some things that can come up. All right, so we talked about managing your cash flow, talked about debt, saving, investing. Let's talk about managing your mindset. As you go along doing this process with managing your money, you want to manage your mindset. You want to notice the thoughts that come up for you around money. Question those thoughts, right? Are they true? What else could be true? Because typically our thoughts are just our opinions, right? They're not objective facts. And so there could be someone else who sees the same situation that you're looking at and has a different opinion about it. You also want to notice how you're speaking to yourself. So like, for example, if you're always telling yourself that, you suck with money, or, every time you do something that puts you off track, you tell yourself you'll never get the hang of it or whatever. Like imagine if somebody else were there telling you those things. Like you would feel terrible. You would hate that person. But you also feel that way when you do it to yourself, right? We never talk to other people the way that we talk to ourselves, and we wouldn't allow other people to talk to us that way either. So, one of the things that I do and that I teach my people is to think about like how you would treat a loved one, right? Have compassion for yourself. Just, because you don't know how to do something yet, or you haven't yet gotten the results that you want, doesn't mean that you'll never get there, right? But we can have compassion for ourselves. We can think about how we would talk to a friend or a spouse or a kid, right? We wouldn't talk to them the same way that we talk to ourselves and beat ourselves down about our mistakes. And ultimately, as you go through, you do the strategy that I laid out for you, you're, questioning your thoughts, thinking about money differently, you can expect to feel more in control because you are choosing how you want to use your money rather than just seeing what happens. You know exactly where your money's going, so you stop feeling stressed and overwhelmed. You don't even think about money as much, right? You feel peace with your money. You have more money available for your goals without feeling deprived. And ultimately, as you do this work, you create more freedom and flexibility in your life as you control your spending, and you direct your money intentionally, you have way more options available to yourself, which is an amazing place to be. So that is it for the presentation. I am going to answer some questions, but I wanted to let you know about a free gift that I have for you. So I created an ebook called 5 Mistakes That Keep Lawyers in Debt. It goes over the top things that I have seen after talking with over 100 lawyers about their debt. And you can get it at rothomas.com/VBA.